Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another episode of Total Breakdown. This time we've got a submission from Dorjan, who's playing as the Dwarfs, fighting DreadnoughtBismarck, who is also commanding the Dwarfs. So we've got some Dwarf on Dwarf action coming today, but before we do that, let's look at army composition. So first off, Dorjan's got a Dwarf Lord in charge, alongside 5 units of Longbeards, 3 units of Hammerers, 3 units of Thunderers, and 2 units of Cannons. You'll notice that 2 of these Longbeard units are ranked up to rank 3, while the remaining 3 are ranked up to rank 2. Then, over on DreadnoughtBismarck's side, we've got Ungrim Iron Fist in charge alongside some Miners, and then 7 units of Longbeards with great weapons, 5 units of Quarrelers with great weapons, a unit of Gyrocopters, and a unit of Organ Guns. Now, these compositions are both interesting in their own ways, in sort of what they are and how they're used, but we'll get into that on the battlefield. So, first things first, let's take a look at what we're going to be seeing here. Now, Dorjan is built for a more aggressive role in this battle, so he is going to push forward and engage. Meanwhile, DreadnoughtBismarck is going to hold the line over here, and he also has a unit of Miners hidden tucked away over here to do a flanking maneuver as soon as this engagement pushes forward. And he's also got these Gyrocopters off to the side. We're going to be pulled down to engage Dwarven artillery over on Dorjan's side. Now, I would like to point out that the majority of Dorjan's army, his sort of main line, is not armor-piercing. They're regular Longbeards. Meanwhile, DreadnoughtBismarck actually has Quarrelers with great weapons, as I mentioned, and they are equipped for melee engagements, which is something you're going to see happen, and we'll take a look at how that goes. Now, as things start off, we've got your sort of standard engagement rules, I guess. We've got an artillery versus artillery volley going on here. Because DreadnoughtBismarck placed his units the way he did, those initial shots from the cannons actually took out some of the other units surrounding it. Let's get that card up there. Now, what's going on here is a bit of an issue for me. Over on Dorjan's side, it makes sense to take out these organ guns before they can get too much damage done. As these lines draw closer, the organ gun can do a lot of damage to the infantry. However, over on DreadnoughtBismarck's side, he's actually targeting the Dwarven cannons himself. These Gyrocopters have already been assigned this task. They're being sent down to take care of Dwarven artillery. The role of these organ guns should be to cause as much damage as possible to these infantry lines as they come in. In fact, I would say that the organ gun should have been placed here or somewhere in this region and fired across the field, causing as much damage and collateral damage as possible. Instead, we've got them firing at cannons, which I don't think is the best use of them. Now, you'll also notice that as these lines are converging, the main line here on DreadnoughtBismarck's side is largely formed with these Quarrelers with great weapons, and instead we've got the Longbeards with great weapons on the flanks as sort of supplementary or supporting units. So this is never a good idea. You don't want your main line to be composed of something like Quarrelers. Sure, they've got great weapons, they're armor-piercing as a result, and they're quote-unquote decent melee combatants. However, they're not meant to hold the line. Them being decent melee combatants mean they can do a decent job against other ranged units, or for example, they can be used to flank. So had they been on the sides and then been pulled around to flank once the engagement starts, that would have been a bit more sensible. So while this engagement is happening here, you'll notice that these Gyrocopters have come in and they are opening fire on the artillery here, and at the same time these 2 units of Thunderers are being pulled back to take care of the Gyrocopters very quickly. So good play, Dorjan. Good job noticing that the Gyrocopter had come in and just quickly sending them back to dispatch of these units. Now, as these front lines collide here, you'll see that a decent amount of damage had already been done to Dorjan's units with some focus fire from the Quarrelers. 2 of them were focusing down in this side, and 3 of them were focusing down on this side, and you'll see there are 2 units that are quite heftily damaged. Now, while that's happened, at the same time, DreadnoughtBismarck has decided he's going to pull a flanking maneuver. Now, in theory, that's a great idea, so let's slow it down for a second. These guys here, they were sitting over here pretty, and they're being pulled around and forced into the backs of these Hammerers here. So not only is it a good call to pull a flanking maneuver, that's also a good target. You do want to target units that threaten you the most. Hammerers are great at causing some serious damage. However, as you can see, they're being chased down by Hammerers right now. And as soon as they make impact here, they're just going to get surrounded themselves because of that rear flank that's happening to them. Instead, what should have happened, and this is a couple steps removed, over on this flank, we've got a 3-on-1 situation. Ungrim Iron Fist alongside 2 Longbeards with great weapons against 1 unit of Hammerers, and the Thunderers are, sure, providing support. Now, these miners should have already been pulled in. These guys got past here a long time ago, so these miners should have been pulled in to scare off these Thunderers, and at the same time, one of these units of Longbeards should have been pulled down to help support this battle and make it a 2-on-2, and this unit of Longbeards here should have been pulled to flank these guys, and this unit of Longbeards should have actually held the line. You'll see as we go into normal speed, as soon as these guys collide, which happens right now, so they collide, they cause a little bit of damage from, morale damage from attacking in the flank, but almost instantly that's reversed because they get attacked in the rear, and now they're losing because they're actually sandwiched between 2 decent units, whereas these Longbeards are taking care of Quarrelers with great weapons, who aren't a big deal, and then on the other side they've been flanked by Longbeards, but they're, quickly falling apart. So had that movement taken place instead, that would have been much better balanced. Good thinking there by DreadnoughtBismarck. Great thinking, great targeting. However, it's just the reaction to those Hammerers coming down was not the best, and you'll see already they've given up. In fact, they've given up before these Quarrelers had given up, so that really tells you the power of surrounding a unit, and it helps, of course, that the Dwarf Lord is in there as well. Another issue that you can see here is that these guys are sitting quietly, even though there's a perfect gap to fire through. The fire from this one last remaining organ gun could have made a huge difference to this engagement over here. However, they were never called in to fight there. Later on, they do get engaged here, but it would have been extremely helpful. Could have actually changed how this entire engagement took place had these guys had the presence of mind of firing into the enemy. And even now, they could be firing into this clump here. Now over here, the Hammerers of Dorjan actually fell apart because they were severely outnumbered. Ungrim was in there as well, and he's a great melee fighter. And that freed up these Longbeards to go in to help here, and these miners to start giving chase. Great move by Dorjan to pull these Thunderers back right away, and open fire from both of these Thunderers into the more broken enemy units. Their morale is already low, and their health is already low, so this damage is actually severely more important than if they'd been aiming down at this fresh unit, because this is going to cause them to rout. So great play there, good job focusing on a unit that was already almost broken, because that's going to trickle the effect across the army. Those guys are going to break, that's going to cause more allies to break because their friends are routing, and you'll see very quickly that morale bar has dropped, and that's the end of the fight. DreadnoughtBismarck, as a result of poor troop management and poor targeting and placement, has really quickly lost this battle against some rather, to be honest, poorly equipped dwarves on Dorjan's side. And there you have it, the decisive victory for Dorjan. So again, I mentioned it a couple times, but I will mention it again, I think. This battle really fell apart for DreadnoughtBismarck as a result of poor use of his Quarrelers with great weapons. Just because they're decent melee fighters doesn't mean they are melee fighters. They're more of an auxiliary support troop. You'll see they didn't get that many kills because despite having armor-piercing weapons, their melee attack and melee defense is not that great. So better management of these Quarrelers with great weapons would have then inevitably resulted in better management of these Longbeards with great weapons, and that would mean they would have more kills, they would form a stronger line, the Quarrelers could have done some flanking maneuvers, done some better work that way. Instead, you've had the entire army sort of fall apart because your main line was built of units that should never be a main line. Meanwhile, over on Dorjan's side, I have to say, ballsy move going in with just Longbeards. Typically, when you're going up against dwarves, you want to take Longbeards with great weapons because of the armor-piercing capability, but instead, clearly you decided to rank them up instead, which did help. It helped with their melee attack, melee defense, and leadership, so they were getting more hits in, and they were blocking more hits. So that seemed to work out, though really not a safe call. Had this army, had DreadnoughtBismarck's army been better managed, it would have been a quick loss for Dorjan, actually, I believe. Also, good use of the Hammerers, using them as supplementary units, getting them in there as support units and coming in from the flanks, great use. And again, Thunderers, you can't go wrong. In fact, I would almost advise that DreadnoughtBismarck, instead of having Quarrelers with great weapons, who only do armor-piercing damage when engaged in melee, he should have been fielding Thunderers as well. Sure, they cost a bit more, but they will do more damage, especially against an enemy like the Dwarves, who are all armored. And, as I was mentioning, of course, great use of cannons as well by Dorjan. In fact, one of them actually ranked up, and an unfortunate sort of mismanagement of an organ gun by Dreadnought Bismarck. Had they been kept busy after the melee engagement had started, or had they been placed in a different location, allowing them to crossfire into the advance, they could have caused some serious hurt. The shields that these Longbeards were carrying would do very little to hold back against the fire of an organ gun. Overall, the compositions on both sides and the use of those compositions on both sides were a little different from the usual, you might even say questionable, but it led to an interesting battle and an important lesson. Use your units, once again, for what they're meant to be used for. If you want to pull them out of their comfort zone, make sure you're giving them the ideal situation to do that in. These quarrelers with great weapons, while they should never be the front line, they can make a great flanking unit. You can pull them around the side, even against some hammerers, say, and really cause morale damage and trickle down some hurt, but that's only after they don't have any other options. Their best use would be, in fact, to not be on the battlefield at all. They should have been Thunderers, but if you're going to field quarrelers with great weapons, use them to pinwheel and encircle weaker enemy units to help one flank and then create an envelopment movement rather than form a front line. Now, of course, as a result of that mismanagement, this was a very quick, very decisive battle in favor of Dorjan, who did a great job managing troops who were poorly equipped, to be entirely honest. I hope you guys learned an important lesson about unit management from this Total Breakdown episode, and of course, if you'd like more Total War content, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and I am still taking submissions, so if you have some interesting battles, especially what with the new DLC, new magical lores that are available, make sure to send those over, and I will be picking up the pace on this segment very soon. You're going to see a lot more battles coming out of this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.